Welcome to episode 24 of the Ikario podcast. In today's episode, Abby is back as my co-host, and we are talking about cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, and more importantly, we're talking about wealth building. I wanted to record this podcast episode at this point in time because there is a bit of a cryptocurrency boom going on. And well, here's the thing. A lot of people are going to see the hype build up and are going to wonder, is there a way for me to make some quick riches in this crypto boom? And unfortunately, the answer for most people is most likely no. People who are looking for quick riches in a situation like this usually end up losing out. And what's worse, people who get into this for the quick riches don't only most likely end up losing money, but they also will end up missing out on the real opportunity that is here. There is a real opportunity here, but it's not in making lots of money in the short term as easily as possible. If you're interested in longer term wealth building, if you're interested in doing the work that will build financial freedom for yourself, then this podcast episode is for you. And let me clarify something. This podcast is not going to be about the technicalities of cryptocurrency. We are not going to be talking about what is Bitcoin, how does a blockchain work, what is cryptography, all these technical details. I leave that to the experts. Instead, this is about strategy and about human behavior. What I want to give you here are the tools and the steps and the strategies that you can use to make the most out of this boom in crypto that is currently happening, but also to lay the foundation for longer term wealth building, no matter where you start from. I will also link to resources for further learning on this topic. And you can go to ikario.com/024 for episode 24. That's ikario.com/024 to find all of my show notes and links to recommended resources. That includes a link to our earlier episode on this podcast that we called How to Get Your Shit Together Financially, which is kind of a crash course in the first steps of financial literacy and wealth building. And I think you'll find the combination of that episode with the one you're listening to right now extremely valuable. So with that said, let's jump right into my conversation with Abby. Actually, before we start, just a quick legal disclaimer. Just to be clear, I am not a financial advisor and I'm not an accredited or credentialed anything. I am just some guy with some experience and some ideas. So nothing you hear on this podcast should be construed as financial advice. Everything you hear here is for entertainment purposes only. All right, let's get to it. All right, we're back again with myself, Shane Milach, and Abby once again is here for a podcast episode. And today I want to talk about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency without really talking about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. So yeah, to lead into this, right now there is a craze, or we're at the climbing stage of a cycle where things like Bitcoin and other cryptocurrency and blockchain related technology and currencies and whatnot are going to be in the mainstream news more and more, or even on social media and so on, right? It's like it's in that part because the price of Bitcoin is really high right now, and there are some other things happening that are basically creating lots of headlines, which will get lots and lots of people excited about cryptocurrency. And there's a huge potential here for people to get burned. And for maybe, I don't know if you've heard of this, but there's this story of in investing, right? This kind of a famous story. I can't actually remember who the protagonist was supposed to be, but it was like this Wall Street fund manager is going to get his shoes shined, and he gives the shoe shine boy the 25 cents or whatever. This would be sometime in the past, right? Gives him the 25 cents or whatever it is, and the shoe shine says, I'm going to invest this in the stock market because I hear that that's the best way to make money. And the investor hears that and immediately goes and sells all of his stocks. And why does he do that? Well, because he thinks, look, if even the shoe shine, the kid on the street essentially, if even he is excited about investing in the stock market, that means we're at the peak of a bubble and it's about to burst. The price is about to come down, right? And this is a kind of cycle that happens quite a lot. And I want to talk about cryptocurrency and Bitcoin from the perspective of human behavior, like human psychology, because essentially that's the ikario, it's a very ikario thing to do, is to think about, okay, what's human behavior like, and what are flaws and biases in my own psychology and in my own behavior, and how can I design my life in such a way that I'm not the victim of those flaws, but that I can be strategic and smart about it. So I want to talk about this as an opportunity to learn something valuable that can lead to a path to wealth building and financial freedom. But I want to contrast this like the thing that happens if you just follow your human psychology, your instincts, versus the thing that you should be doing instead in order to not lose money on this thing. Right? There's basically two ways in which you can lose here. Is you can enter the investing into blockchain technology in the wrong way at the wrong time and lose a bunch of money. Or you can miss out on it entirely, right? You can just dismiss it as, oh, this is some weird stuff, or some man on TV said this is all just a bubble or something, so I'm just going to ignore it. And then 10 years from now, you look back and be like, oh my God, I can't believe I missed out on this, right? So we want to avoid both of those things, and I want to talk about how to do that, basically. So to just quickly, we haven't spoken much about this on the team, so just curious, without revealing any details, obviously, do you own any Bitcoin or any crypto?
So the first thing that came to mind when you were saying all this stuff, right, was you're kind of saying, yes, you experience FOMO, but if that's the only thing you experience, if you're going off your natural, instincts, you're probably following a very specific path that will lead to disaster.
Yeah.
And back in, when was it, 2 years ago, whenever there was a previous Bitcoin hype.
2016, 2017, yeah.
Yeah, 2016, 2017. I invested some money in Bitcoin back then. And then because I didn't get rich overnight, I was like, that was pointless anyways. And I went down and I never looked at it again. And now I checked again and the money's up a little, but I never invested any significant amount to even actually make a huge difference, right?
Yeah.
So inadvertently, I kind of did the right thing, but I also didn't put in that much money.
Yeah, you did. So, and that's an important point. So right there, like many people, loads of people got in 2016, 2017, which is like the last hype, or the last boom. And I'd been interested in Bitcoin before that. Like basically one cycle before was the first time I wanted to buy Bitcoin. But at the time, it was basically too complicated. I remember sitting there going, oh yeah, I should buy some Bitcoin. And then, I'd have to use this, but they only, you have to be an American, or you have to have an American bank account for this exchange. And this exchange doesn't work with my card and stuff. And I just gave up on it, And then I forgot about it again. And then the next cycle, again, I bought in. And like you, I saw the value of my investments drop a lot. But basically what I want to talk about is like, both of us did one thing very right, which is that we didn't realize our losses, right? You can see the price of your investment drop and then say, okay, whatever, I'm going to sell. And then you've realized the loss. You've actually made that loss. Whereas if you just hold on, if you believe in the asset, you just hold on, then eventually it comes back up. And so that is what happened to me as well. And in fact, even as prices went down, I kept buying more. And more importantly, I kept learning more about this. I kept learning more and more about this, so that this time around in this cycle, I've been doing great. And I basically want to talk about that, because you already did one thing right in not realizing your loss. If you just hold on to it, again, if you believe in the asset, if you believe in the long-term future of something like Bitcoin, it doesn't matter when you buy, you just buy and hold, and eventually you're in the green. So right there, that's already good. And basically exactly that is happening again. Like loads of people got excited, 2016, 2017, put a bunch of money in, waiting for quick riches. The quick riches didn't materialize. And then the worst thing you can do is realize your losses by selling everything at a loss. and then forgetting about it again, and then getting excited again when the prices go up again, right? And the biggest problem I see here is that if you don't take any information out of this, and that's basically what I want to encourage people to do, is like use this excitement to, use that excitement to fuel a kind of a learning spree and really learn about what is Bitcoin, what is Ethereum, what is blockchain, what are these NFT things, and so on. And the more you learn about it, the better you'll be at becoming like a wise investor instead of just someone who gets dumped on and loses a lot of money. And on that note, let's quickly talk about NFTs, right? Because I think that's one of the things that might drive this cycle. So NFTs, non-fungible tokens, are a form of blockchain technology where you can essentially have, a unique, it kind of can prove unique ownership of something. And this is making the news because digital art, so you can basically own unique digital art where even if it's digital art, right, it's a JPEG file or something, we can say, well, anyone can copy this, but you can own the original. And the NFT, the non-fungible token, is essentially a non-falsifiable proof that you, in fact, own the original. And so that's just like, of course, I can get a really high-quality replica of the Mona Lisa and I can hang it in my living room, but that is not the same as owning the original Mona Lisa, right? And so NFTs are essentially the equivalent of that in the art world. And this is making a lot of news because recently, a digital artist known as Beeple sold one piece of digital art for, what was it, $69 million, I think?
Yeah, it was something crazy, yeah.
Yeah. And even before that, he sold a round of stuff and made something like $15 million. So this guy's approaching like $100 million in sales of his digital art now. And I think that is causing a lot of excitement. Some sports, I know there's this thing called like NBA Top Shot, where it's almost like a card collecting thing where you can own a moment in NBA history essentially. And that's also, your unique ownership. Of course, if it's someone, whatever, a slam dunk by some player, and you own that, well, obviously everybody can watch that. Everybody can watch it online, but you own the original, so to speak. And of course, that's a bit silly, but it's arguably anyone who spends millions upon millions on art, it's always a bit silly, right? But the point is, I think this kind of thing will fuel this boom. Because you'll hear lots of stories about people making millions of dollars selling this stuff and also reselling this stuff. And that's where it can get dangerous, right? When you hear, okay, someone bought, for example, with Beeple's art, maybe someone bought one of his pieces for like 100K a few weeks ago and then sells it next week for like 2 million or something. It's like, oh my God, look at that return on investment. And there could be like a rush where people try to find the next thing, right? And everybody buys NFTs hoping to be able to sell it at 100x value shortly after. And then the price of Bitcoin itself also is, has been going up, not quite as spectacularly as before, but still, it's a lot of people have gotten large returns on their Bitcoin now. And that kind of thing that will generate this hype. And like you said, it will basically generate FOMO, right? And FOMO is the worst reason to buy. It's just when you see the price shooting up and you go, oh my God, I'm missing out, and you buy in, that is an almost surefire sign that you're late. Right? If the price is already rocketing up, it's an almost surefire sign that you're late. So that's basically, I guess that's the first point, is like, don't FOMO in. Don't FOMO into something expecting super fast riches, because that almost always goes wrong.
Okay, so excellent point right there, because as you were mentioning all of that, the main thing I guess I wanted to ask you about was, it seems like the primary driver behind all this is greed, right? Like, how can I make money ASAP? Now, if you're saying don't operate from that, but then the basis of these industries is that specific emotion. So what should really be your aim then, like as someone? Mm-hmm. Let's say you don't want to get rich overnight, but you're willing to put in 5-10 years.
Oh yeah, I think that right there makes all the difference. Because, so I mean, greed is definitely an important, it's a huge aspect in any market is greed, right? And ultimately, that's what most people are in it for, is just I want more money. But it's a very different perspective if you say, because if you just see stories of people saying, oh my God, I put $1,000 into whatever, right? Whatever the thing is last week, and now it's worth $10,000. And also you've been seeing the meme go around where it's like, if you had put your first stimulus check into Bitcoin, it would now be worth $24,000. You see that kind of thing. You go, okay, basically it's what you're seeing is someone put in $1,000, got out $10,000 in a matter of weeks. I want that kind of thing. That is a completely different story from saying, I want more money 5 to 10 years from now than I have now, right? Because I think that something like Bitcoin, there is definitely an opportunity here to make money on a 5 to 10 year scale. So my thesis on this right now is that I do believe that the current cycle, I think the price is going to keep going up for a while, and I'm sure the price is going to fall again. But I believe that 5 years from now, the price of Bitcoin will be significantly higher than it is now. But that's a very different perspective, because if you think, okay, I want more money 5 years from now, then right away you're not going to put in any money that you can't afford to lose or that you can't afford to live without, right? If you're thinking, hey, I want to 10x my money by next weekend, you're just going to smash everything in. And if you don't 10x your money by next weekend, you're in trouble, right? Because you put money in that you can't live without. But if you're thinking, okay, 5 years from now, immediately your attitude towards this whole thing is different. And then also and this I think is the power of information, right? Like I said, the best thing you can do, in my opinion, is use the excitement that is generated by the action happening. And that, yes, is generated by greed, right? It gets you excited to think, oh my God, I could be a millionaire in short order, hopefully. But use that excitement to inform yourself and to learn about this stuff. Because if you do so, you can get to the point where, because for a 5-year investment, you want to know what this thing is before you can decide whether or not you're good. Because you have to make the decision, I'm going to put money into this, and I know that in the course of 5 years, the price will go up and it will go down, it will go up and it will go down. It might go drastically down, but I'm going to hold on because I believe in this thing. Well, I have to know what this thing is, right? So right there, if you can use that excitement to actually inform yourself about what's going on, basically information is power, knowledge is power in this game. And that's what I recommend people do. But also, let me just quickly talk about, because greed is one thing, it's just more money, okay. Now, like I said, use this excitement to inform yourself. Well, let me provide a little bit of my perspective of what I think is interesting about this stuff, besides the opportunity to make more money. So a big reason why I'm enthusiastic about blockchain technology is because I really like the principle of decentralization. And right away, let me just also say, in the show notes of this episode, I'll link to some sources where you can learn about more of the basics and more of the technicalities of cryptocurrency and blockchain. I don't want to be talking about these technicalities here. And if I start doing it, by the way, call me out, right? If I go down a rabbit hole of talking about technical details, because I don't think that's the most useful thing I can provide. I'm not a developer, so I don't understand the technical, like the code base of these things to a great enough detail that I would be the right person to ask about this. And I'm not an expert enough to be talking about, the principles and the technical differences between one blockchain thing versus another blockchain thing, right? I'm not the right person to talk about that. Again, I'm more of a, my perspective is more like human psychology and like wealth building. Those are things where I have some experience in, right? So, but having said that, right, one of the things I'm excited about and one of the reasons I believe in this is I really like the idea of decentralization and essentially cutting out the middleman. And let me give you like a very practical example of this. A few years ago, I was in Bali and I wanted to buy a motorcycle. And secondhand, right, I was looking at, and I found someone who had one listed, and I went to try it out. And it looked great, the price was right, we agreed on a price. And from that, it's kind of the handshake moment. Okay, I've agreed to buy it for this price, you've agreed to sell it for this price. But from that point on, it was like 2 weeks until I actually got the bike and rode off on it. And why did it take 2 weeks? It's basically because of all the middlemen. Because, okay, I'm here, I have a Swiss bank account with Swiss money in it. This guy has an Indonesian bank account, and right away, for some reason, I can't make a transaction from my bank account into his bank account. So it was just, for some reason, it was rejected, right? So then I have to think about, well, how do I pay this person in Indonesian rupiah? And I had already tried, because I was in Bali for quite a long time, or I was in Bali often enough that I thought I could open a local bank account. But when I tried to open a local bank account, also immediately, because some paper I didn't have or something I didn't have, it was just immediately rejected. There's no way I can open a local bank account. So I can't pay from my bank account to his bank account. I can't open a local bank account. I tried TransferWise, that also didn't work. So what I ended up having to do is I ended up having to go to the ATM and withdraw money. But there's a limit for every withdrawal, and there's a daily limit. And so I had to go and make like 14 withdrawals spread out over 5 days, something like that, in order to get all this cash for this motorcycle. And of course, every time I do that, there's a fee and there's a currency conversion fee and God knows what. And so then eventually I have this bundle of cash and I bring it over and I can hand it to that person. And then I have to get, and then there's the registration thing, the slip has to be changed and so that I'm the official owner, and just all these steps, right? All these steps involved until I can finally drive away on this motorcycle. And so it ends up taking more time and it ends up costing more money than it should have. And blockchain tech would be the perfect solution for this. Because first of all, with cryptocurrency, if we had agreed, and I asked him about it, but he didn't use it. But if I had agreed to buy this in Bitcoin or in Ethereum or in Nano or in any crypto, then we could have made that transaction and we could have made it in seconds, right? At most minutes. In other words, we could have, after that handshake moment where we agree on the price, I could have opened my phone, the app on the phone, he opens the app on the phone, I scan the QR code, and then we wait for a few minutes or so, and then the transaction is confirmed. And it is 100%, it's what's called a trustless transaction, which is that there is no way to falsify this. There's no way for me to cheat him out of money, right? Like if he sees, and basically everyone can see it, every person on earth can see that transaction in the blockchain and can see, I indeed sent this amount of money to you. There's no way to cheat this. So, which is also pretty important, right? So we don't have to worry about, is this person trustworthy? What's going on? It's just like, if you see this transaction, it has happened, right? So within minutes, we could have settled the transaction. It would have been way, way cheaper. And this is where NFTs come in. So the motorbike could be, in a decentralized like crypto future, the ownership of the motorbike could be a non-fungible token, which means it could also be registered on a blockchain where we can transfer ownership from him to me without having to go to a middleman and register a new number and and sign the paper and all this kind of thing. And then let's say the police who want to find out who this bike is registered to, they can just reference the blockchain, which will tell them in real time when the ownership switch has happened. And to take that even further, the ideal situation would be this entire thing could happen through a smart contract, where basically I can say, I'm going to make that payment into a smart contract, which basically is it's programmed. So you don't need a notary or a lawyer or anything like that. I'm going to make the payment into the smart contract. That smart contract will change the ownership of the vehicle to me and then release the funds to you. Where again, there's just no chance of anyone like screwing anyone over, right? Because it's all essentially automated and it's all completely provable and transparent. So that would be like the ideal future. And that's a simple example. Like how much simpler would it be? You get, hey, I want to buy this motorcycle. I can see in the public ledger that you are indeed the owner of this motorcycle. So I don't have to worry about, did you steal it from someone or whatever? And you don't have to worry about me either. We can basically agree on it. I pay into a smart contract, and the successful trustless transaction of this real world item and the correct and fair and low fee payment of it is basically guaranteed algorithmically, right? This is the kind of thing that I look at and say, yes, that's what I want. And that is a superior solution to what we have right now. So in terms of investment, I can clearly see a path where this technology enables a much better solution to problems that exist in the real world, right? And you could take that further. I mean, imagine buying a house like that, like buying property like that, you know? Like how many middlemen could you cut out of the process of like purchasing property if you could do it like that? Or even, you know, with the work we do in ikario, like there is a potential future here where we have a smart contract that governs how the revenue we generate is split between everyone involved. And where that could even happen in real time, where it's no longer, because right now there's basically a central authority, right? There's a central authority that goes, okay, here are the different amounts of money owed to the different people, and we pay the bills, and there's a lot of manual work involved, right? And it goes through a bank and so on. This could be basically automated, where we say all the revenue that comes in goes into a smart contract. That smart contract does automatic distribution to everyone involved in the right amounts and so on, right? And it could even happen on like a weekly or daily basis or something like that. So there are a lot of use cases like that I see where I'm thinking that's the future that I would like to live in. And investing in blockchain technology is me saying, I believe in that future. I believe that we're moving in that direction.
Okay. First of all, you painted the picture perfectly. I can 100% see the benefits of this. And it kind of reminds me of what Upwork does. Upwork has something similar. You transfer funds in, and until it's proven that, you know, the work is done, the funds don't get released.
Yeah. It's like an escrow, yeah.
I can see why. Yeah, escrow, exactly. I can see why banks and governments would put up heavy resistance to this, because they're losing power essentially, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's definitely one of the reasons to be concerned, is that there's definitely a lot of incentives for currently powerful institutions to be like, no, we want to remain the middleman here because we make loads of money out of extorting that, right? And for example, PayPal is a great example of this, where they have totally extortionate currency conversion fees. I'm really surprised actually that they haven't been hit with any, you know, that they haven't been investigated for this or something. It's like really, really extortionate conversion fees, and they lock you into having to do the conversion. So because my business is registered in Switzerland, I have a Swiss PayPal account which will automatically, it can only pay out in Swiss francs. So any payments that I get in a different currency have to go through PayPal's conversion, where they take a huge amount of, they've taken so much money from my business through this. And it's not, you know, this is a feature, like they lock their users into having to use their currency conversion, and they just absolutely rinse them for it, right? It's totally extortionate. And of course, PayPal doesn't want me to be like, hey, you know what, I don't need PayPal anymore, right? But that's exactly the problem with centralized power, is because PayPal are probably making billions of dollars on this every year. So it is absolutely not in their interest to make this any easier for their users, or to make these fees any more reasonable. And that is absolutely true. Like, there could be pushback there, and there is pushback there, right? It's, in general, governments are not highly enthusiastic about cryptocurrency. But two things I want to say about that is, first of all, that cryptocurrency is resilient against government intervention. Basically, a government can absolutely, you know, if we take Bitcoin as an example, there's nothing a government can do to stop Bitcoin, right? Of course, they can try to go after, they can say Bitcoin is illegal in this country and we'll try to come after you if you use it and all this kind of stuff. And it's kind of a situation like the war on drugs, you know? Of course, you could tell people, okay, you can't smoke marijuana, and you do all kinds of stuff to try and go after people and so on. How's that going for you, right? It just doesn't work. It does not work. It won't stop people from using it. And the same is basically true with Bitcoin. So a government can do all kinds of stuff to try and make Bitcoin illegal, but people will just keep using it. And certainly they can't do anything to threaten the Bitcoin network itself. There's nothing a government can do, like short of nuking the entire world plus some of the satellites that are orbiting it. That's what you'd have to do, right? You'd basically have to go scorched earth on the entire planet to extinguish Bitcoin. So there's nothing a government can do against this. And also there are opportunities for middlemen to still make money here. And this is also one of the reasons why I think there's currently a boom again. There's more and more institutions buying into Bitcoin and offering things like cryptocurrency ETFs and so on. So if they're smart about it, they can still make money, right? And I think that's probably going to be the flip that's slowly happening, is that they go from, oh, this is dangerous and this is a threat to our authority and our power, to, oh, maybe this is an opportunity, maybe we should get in now. And then suddenly they're on the pro blockchain side, right? Because now they're making money from this thing growing.
Yeah, true. You're absolutely right there. I think this is your entrepreneur side shining through, because every quote unquote difficulty, you perceive it as an opportunity. Right, that's not necessarily everyone's perspective. But the thing that scares me about this is when Facebook comes out with Libra, like Bitcoin, fair enough. I don't know who made it. I mean, I'm sure I do, the history or whatever. But anything from Facebook, I know by default is like, this is a bad idea. It needs to be stopped. So, or maybe I'm just being a little too paranoid.
No, for sure. That's absolutely true. And that is also, that's one of the things. And this, again, is actually a great point to bring up, because this is one of the things that I think is really important to inform. If for anyone who is looking at this and wants to use this as an opportunity to potentially build wealth for themselves into the future, that's one of the things you have to be really clear about. Like, what exactly is blockchain technology, and what's the difference between a decentralized blockchain and a centralized blockchain, right? Because it's very different for Facebook to say, hey, we have a thing that's kind of like this cool Bitcoin thing. Don't you want to use it? It's like, no. This is not like Bitcoin in any of the ways that matter, okay? And the same thing happens, there's a lot of stuff like this, like with, Ethereum. So NFTs, like we talked about, non-fungible tokens, or most of them are issued on the Ethereum network. And that's one of the things, man, you have to find out what the difference between Bitcoin and Ethereum is and why they are two totally different things. That's one of the things you need to lean into this and figure this out. Because once you do, like, the more you learn about this, the more exciting it gets. But it's really important that you don't just think, well, Bitcoin is a thing that's some kind of a virtual currency and it has a price, and Ethereum is another kind of virtual currency and it has a price, and one of them is higher than the other, and whatever, right? If that's the limit of your knowledge, then you're not going to get rich off of this. But like, the more you understand about what these things actually are, the greater the potential there. And it's the same with, Ethereum has been like the number two after Bitcoin, essentially, for a long time. And there are always these Ethereum killers, just like there are like Bitcoin killers, the better Bitcoin tries to come along. And that's also one of the things with a lot of these Ethereum killers are, the difference is they're not decentralized. And it's just not the same. It's not the same when someone says, hey, we have, like Ethereum, we have smart contracts and we have this and we have that, we have NFTs. Yeah, but it's not decentralized. It is, someone owns the server on which this thing runs. And if they pull the plug, the whole thing is over. That's a different proposition, right? So that's the kind of thing that I think is really important to know and realize. And so far, another thing to think about is that Bitcoin, things like Libra coming along and things like government regulation and things like all kinds of things happening. These are all like attacks on Bitcoin and attacks on other blockchain tech. And this is actually a really important process. Like, one of the reasons why more and more institutions are buying into Bitcoin now, and one of the reasons why Bitcoin is the one that is like the most trusted and that gets all the attention, is because it's been tested the hardest, right? It's been around for 10 years and it has been under threat in countless ways in that period. And I think especially for institutions, that's important to see. It's important to be able to see, okay, this has been around for so long and it has encountered all these obstacles along the way and it's crashed down by 90% several times and all this kind of stuff, but it's still here. And that makes me trust it more. And if someone else comes along and says, hey, we have a better Bitcoin, look, it's like technologically better and it does this and that and the other, it's like, yeah, but it's 1 week old. So I'm not going to put a bunch of money. You know, if I'm an investment fund, I'm not going to put $500 billion into this, you know. But with Bitcoin, I'm like, okay, maybe, you know. So that's also an important part is like the fact that, the fact that it's being challenged is actually important. And something like Libra coming along and crashing and burning, basically. I mean, haven't they renamed it now to something? I think it still exists, but basically, it was a failure. And that's a good thing. You know, that's a good thing to have these challenges where the real blockchain stuff can prove itself, you know?
Yeah. Also, all these quote unquote Bitcoin, Ethereum killers and stuff, it sounds like they missed the fundamental point.
Yeah.
The point was the decentralization. Okay. And I wanted to get your opinion on, from a human psychology perspective, like as you were talking. Okay, yeah, now I remember what I wanted to ask you. So you were saying, like, you know, learn about these things and use the excitement that comes from, oh my God, the market is up or whatever.
Yeah.
Use that excitement and channel that energy into learning more. So essentially, probably if you're excited about it now, you've most likely missed this wave. So, but what you can do is ride the wave of excitement so you can catch on to the next one and not miss that, right?
Yeah, and well, also, you know, sure, like put some money in. Nobody can tell you that you missed this wave. Nobody knows what's going to happen next, right? Which is one of the things you have to learn when you start investing. You have to learn that nobody knows what's going to happen next. And you can you can go and look at all kinds of expert opinions. You'll have, you know, on TV, you'll have highly paid people in expensive suits telling you why, oh, this is definitely going to crash down, blah, blah, blah. And then it doesn't happen. And on the other side, you have people who, you know, draw all kinds of stuff onto complicated looking charts and say, oh, the price is going to be this next week. And then it's not. So people don't know what's going to happen. And even with a long-term prediction, like the prediction I made, I believe in 5 years, Bitcoin is worth more than now. That I might be wrong about that. And it's a very important thing is that especially when it's really good to read about like the history of this kind of stuff, even just like the history of investment before blockchain. There are so many examples of some investor or some investment fund or something, you know, basically someone or a group of people on an amazing winning streak, and they're absolutely sure that they have this thing figured out, right? They're absolutely sure that there's like, and they will talk about how, you know, if they've set up the perfect hedge fund, you know, it's like mathematically impossible for us to lose, right? We have everything so, you know, algorithmically, mathematically, perfectly figured out, and every risk is hedged and so on. There's absolutely no way this can go tits up. And then it blows up in their face. This happens all the time, okay? This happens all the time. So that's one of the things you have to realize is nobody knows what's going to happen next. And so that's why I'm saying, like, obviously, if you're excited about this, definitely put some money in and see what happens. And that's going to make you even more excited. But what's super important is don't put money in that you're not willing to lose. So I want you to think about this, right? If you're thinking, I'm going to put $1,000 into Bitcoin, I want you to picture this. I want you to picture that you put $1,000 into your Coinbase or whatever it is, wherever you buy it, and you check next week and it's down to 5,000. It's down to 5, or, you know, no, let's say you check next week, it's up to 2,000. Okay, wow, great, I've doubled my money. You check a week later, it's back down to 1,000. You check a week later, it's down to 500. You check a bit later, it's down to like $120. What do you do when you see that? Okay, if that makes you panic because you absolutely needed those $1,000, then you've put in too much. If that makes you go, oh, damn, I made a mistake, maybe, but maybe I'll just hold on to it. That's good, right? You want to be playing with an amount of money where if you literally lose all of it, it doesn't significantly hurt you. And this is one of the reasons, like I said, I entered in the last cycle, and I definitely made some mistakes, and I did lose some money, but overall my gains outpace my losses by a big margin now. And one of the reasons that is true is because I never put an amount of money into it where it made me nervous when I saw that price go down. After a while, I was just like, yeah, the price is way down and I'm in the red, right? I'm in the negative. But I was just confident that if I hold on to it long enough, it'll come back. And I was never in the least nervous about this. So that's the position you want to be in. I encourage people, I think you should put some money into it so that you have some skin in the game. And that will also motivate you to learn more about it. But absolutely, like envision seeing a 90% loss. And if that makes you nervous, put in less money. And the good thing is, like, you can put in any amount, right? You can put in like $10 if you want.
Yeah, absolutely right. And that's so true. When we started this conversation, that was one of the things I was thinking. Like, in order to buy and hold, put in as much money as you're willing to lose, right? Yeah. So that could probably be one of the biggest takeaways from this conversation. Like, don't just rush and dump everything you have because tomorrow you're going to be a millionaire.
Yeah,
you might. I don't know, but most likely not.
Yeah, it also reminds me of, look at an approach you can take with this, right? If you can take like just a very rational approach. If you think, look, this blockchain stuff, I'm not so sure about it, but maybe you do a bit of reading about it and you think like, okay, there's like a 5% chance of this going up, right? There's a 5% chance of this being a long-term good bet. Well, then put in 5% of your investment money, right? So if you think about, if you have a bunch of money and you allocate some of it to just like savings, some of it is your money to spend, and some of it is the money you want to invest. Well, if you think there's a 5% chance that Bitcoin is a really good bet in the long term, then put 5% of that money in, right? Because again, like if you're totally wrong and it literally drops to zero, then you've only lost 5% of your investment money, which is not, is not dramatic. But you don't want to make the mistake, and that's essentially the mistake that I think people make, is like either you put in money that should be part of your spending money that you need to survive, or you put in essentially, you just go all in, right? It's like you just chuck all of your investment money in, where even if you don't absolutely need that to live, it'll still make you sweat when you see the price drop.
Yeah. Okay. So question for you, just based on that. You just mentioned put in 5% of your investment money.
Yeah.
Right. So just by saying that, I think that statement automatically would exclude a certain amount of people.
That's true.
Right.
Yeah.
So who should really be focused on quote unquote investing and who shouldn't be, from a personal finance perspective, I suppose.
Yeah.
So let's tie these two in.
Yeah. That's a really good question. And we're going to link to the episode we did on how to get your shit together financially, which is like a crash course for how to get started, right? So like literally from nothing, like the first steps of financial literacy, essentially. And the first steps of wealth building, the very, very first steps. And what we said there is that you should put aside at least 10% of your income, no matter how low your income is. And B, you should build up a savings cushion before you start worrying about investing. And that is still what I advocate. If you're in a position where you, at any given time, you at most have a few $100s to your name, it's like towards the end of the month, it goes towards zero and then you get the next paycheck. It's like investing is probably not the best approach. I would encourage people to first build up a bit of a cushion in just a savings account. And it doesn't have to be big. This is where, once you have that's the first thing to do. Once you have like at least 1 month of your expenses covered, ideally more than that, then you can start looking at how much of this do I want to keep in cash and how much of it do I want to start investing and how do I want to invest it, right? But for sure, that is also one of those things that will actually give you the ability to hold on to an investment in the long term, is if that's not all the money you own, right? It's like, unless you're like a Bitcoin maximalist, and there are people who just put all of the money they don't absolutely need into Bitcoin, that's a very ballsy thing to do. It might pay off for them, it might not. But I think for most people, it's important that changes your mindset about this, absolutely. Like if you have your income plus you have some savings, it's just cash savings, where you know that if something goes wrong, if you need to get your car fixed, or if you lose your job or whatever, you're not immediately in deep shit. Then you can start thinking about allocating an additional amount of your money into investing.
Okay. So the first step is, step one, get your shit together, right?
Yeah.
And if you're still in that process and don't have the surplus money, the investing you should be doing is in your skills and yourself.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's also like the 10% approach. If you put 10% of your money aside, it doesn't actually take that long before you have enough money where you can start thinking, okay, well, I'm building up savings to the point where I'm like, okay, I can start asking myself what else to do. So it's not even that long-term of a strategy, I think. If you start saving 10% a month, you'll be there pretty soon. Where you can ask yourself, should I open an investment account, or should I start putting a bit into crypto or something? It's not that far off.
Yeah, good point. And another question I have, I don't know if I'm going off rails here, just let me know. So you had mentioned about, learn about these things. So what is blockchain? What is this? What is that, et cetera? Mm-hmm. So the question that came to mind was, before, I guess, the information era, the way we would look for validated or verified information is we would go to experts, right?
Yeah.
So one kind of parallel is the medical field. So before it was like, the doctor says this, then that's what it is. You don't contest it. Mm-hmm. But now we have the whole like anti-vaxxer movement, but the doctors are vehemently saying, no, vaccines are saving lives. And people are like, no, they're not. Right. So there is this distrust in authority. And with all the information ever available at your fingertips, people don't know what to actually trust. Yeah. So instead of asking you, what book to read, et cetera, I'm more curious in how would you vet the information you're currently accessing to ensure that you're making a well-informed decision?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think first of all, I think that's super important, right? And it's a general problem it's like an epistemic problem, right? How do we know what we know, or how do we arrive at something where you say, I know something, or I'm sure about something? It's a huge problem on the internet right now, in all areas. And what I would say is look for real and substantive information. Because, for example, if you look at the NFT craze, like we talked about, or just the Bitcoin craze in general, if you look at mainstream news, if you look at articles published in general purpose news websites, and if you look at, whatever the financial news channel, and those people talking about it, it's basically nonsense. Right? Most of it is nonsense. Most of it will be these pundits. Very often are just emotionally responding to this. They're going, oh my God, can you believe someone bought, digital art for millions of dollars? Oh, why would you do that? Oh, they're confused about it, right? It's by the time they get it, it's way too late, So you can't wait for these people to catch up. And also, the mainstream news is not made for this. If you watch CNN Money or something like that, they'll probably bring on some real experts. But those real experts will have 30 seconds to talk, right? Until the pundit says something stupid again. And then they have another 30 seconds, and then they cut to the next thing. So it's this is not substantive information. This is just people reacting. It's basically just people clowning about in front of a camera, right? So you're not going to get information from that. And also, if you look at, crypto news sites, there's basically sites dedicated to publishing crypto news. And most of the stuff there is also garbage, because they're just churning out stories all the time. So they will be, they'll have a story is today Bitcoin breached $60,000 for the first time. This analyst said the price might go up. The other analyst said the price might go down. Oh, really? That's fucking great. That's a real revelation. I'm glad I checked out this site, right? So a lot of it is just this. And that's what I'd look for is are you being just bombarded with shallow nonsense, or are you actually learning stuff? So I would look for depth versus breadth in the information. And the great thing about something like blockchain tech is like there is, even as someone who's non-technical, so like me, like I'm not a programmer, right? But there's a lot of this stuff that I can understand. I can understand the fundamentals of how this stuff works. And I can then think about, well, does this make sense? And I think that the most important thing is you want to get to the point where you can see someone's statement, whether it's someone saying, here's why Bitcoin is going to go to zero, or here's why Bitcoin is going to be $1 million by the end of the year. You want to be looking at that and looking at what are the actual arguments that they use for this. And does this make sense based on my understanding of this technology and based on my understanding of this market, right? And you can get to that point where you can look at these claims and you can look at something like that, like someone makes a price claim, You can look at the claim Bitcoin is going to zero and say, well, what would it take for Bitcoin to go to zero? And from my knowledge of how Bitcoin works and what it is, I know that would be an absolutely apocalyptic event. So someone saying Bitcoin might go to $0 is actually not an argument not to invest in Bitcoin. Because if things go wrong to that degree, you've got far worse problems than that you've lost your money, right? And so you can get to the point where you can understand these things. And also on the flip side, if someone says, Bitcoin's going to go to $1 million, well, you can look at this and see what would it take. You can essentially do the math yourself. That's not even technology dependent, right? You can look at, you can basically run the numbers and you can say, well, what would this mean in terms of buying volume versus selling volume? Like, what would this look like? And so then you can essentially compare someone's statements against your own map of reality. And as you do that, you improve your own map of reality, right? But yeah, even the stuff we talked about before with like decentralized versus non-decentralized networks, that's something you can look up, right? You can learn this and you can find this out for yourself, where it's like, it's not a matter of someone's opinion. You don't have to trust an expert and their opinion. And I would say it's quite similar with, and actually one more thing that is important is you have to know people's incentives, or you have to keep people's incentives in mind. Because in some cases, someone will tell you something not because it's true, and not even because they believe it's true, but because they want to influence you to believe that because they benefit from it somehow, right? And so you want to have a sense of, well, who are these people telling me this and what are their incentives? And the same, I think, is true for things like medical information. If you want to know about vaccines, well, you can look at research done on this. You can look at the source of the anti-vax ideas. And you can, even if you, obviously an anti-vaxxer would say, well, you can't trust these sources. It's all a huge conspiracy. But even then, like, look at all of it and ask yourself, is the conspiracy really this big? Right? Is this, because if you try to prove that to yourself, the size of the conspiracy is absolutely massive. I mean, that's an insanely huge conspiracy that's been going on for decades and decades, involving generations of doctors and researchers, right? And everyone's in on it somehow, except like the two weirdos who published a study that said something else and then had to retract it because they clearly made shit up. And then you can weigh the evidence. It's like, and you can even go further and you can start studying. You can gain an understanding of how the immune system works and so on, and how vaccines work. Where I think you can, even if you can never get to you will never understand like the fundamental nature of reality to such an extent that you can say for sure what exactly a vaccine does. Like, the absolute microscopic atomic reality of what happens inside a human body when they're injected with a vaccine. I don't think most people can ever get to that level of understanding, right? But I also don't think it's necessary. I think you can get to a sufficient level of understanding where you can make sense of people's arguments. And maybe this is an important indicator. It's like, as long as you're consuming information and you're just taking it in, you haven't learned enough. So if like person number one in a white lab coat says, vaccines are good and healthy, and you go, okay, vaccines are good and healthy. Person number two in a white lab coat says, no, vaccines are dangerous. You go, oh, they're dangerous. Well, you haven't learned anything. You're just hoping that someone else has learned something, right? But you have to get to the point where someone makes these statements and you have your own map of reality that you can use to evaluate these statements. And yeah, again, that's basically true for all learning, for all knowledge. So that's where I would encourage people to get to. You want to get to the point, because look, my experience of this, this is why I say most of the stuff published on these sites is nonsense. It's because when I look at this, because at my level of knowledge of the subject matter, I look at what they write and I go, what I would like to do here is I would like to understand your arguments and then think about whether those arguments make sense. But you have no arguments. And so then that's the end of the story, right?
Yeah. First of all, thank you so much for that comprehensive answer. I was really hoping you actually just demonstrated what you said people should be looking for. It wasn't just, oh, because I say so, or because I feel this way. It was like, no, here are a list of arguments, right? And the main takeaway that I took from what you're saying is, and I think this extends to the general information era that we live in, is that yes, they're experts. Listen to them, understand where they're coming from, but more importantly, from their argumentation, draw your own conclusions.
Yeah, exactly.
That's probably how I could sum it up the best. Like, draw your own conclusions. Like, if you were to ask me, like, why should I put, I don't know, 10 grand in Bitcoin? And if I just say, because I woke up and the first step I took was my right foot on the ground, it's usually a great day when that happens. It's probably not a great idea.
And that's, and I think that's also, again, if we come back to investing, I think with investing, it really is a game of like outsmarting your human instincts, because like we mentioned earlier, right? FOMO, because what happens, this is the problem, like if you're investing, your psychological instincts tell you exactly the opposite of what you need to do, because you see the price shoot up and you go, oh my God, I need to buy. And then you buy, and what happens is, because the price has already been going up like crazy and then you bought, it's probably going to start going down. So you probably bought, or it's more likely that following your instincts, you're going to buy close to the top. And then as the price starts falling, your rational brain says, well, the stupidest thing I can do now is sell. Because that, if I still believe in the reasons I bought in the first place, then selling now just realizes my losses. I don't want to do that. But your monkey brain says, oh my God, you're losing money, sell now, right? And that is exactly why the majority of investors lose money, because your gut, your instinct says, oh my God, buy when it's going up, and oh my God, sell when you're losing money. Well, if you do the exact opposite, you're much more likely to win. If you, again, assuming that the underlying project, the thing you're investing in, is sound, what you should do is, there's a famous quote by, I don't know who, be greedy when others are fearful, and be fearful when others are greedy, right? You make the most money when there's blood in the streets. You see everyone else, every other idiot is selling Bitcoin for some reason. These idiots are selling Bitcoin and the price is going down. Well, I'm going to take your Bitcoin, thank you very much, because I know that the price is going to go up again, right? And next time you get excited, I'm going to be sitting here with your cheap Bitcoin, making money off of you, right? That's basically, and that's like the fundamental thing that you have to, as an investor, you have to defeat that monkey mind, because it steers you exactly the wrong way, right? And that's also something that I find fascinating about it. It is really an opportunity, like investing is a real opportunity to like take some of the principles that we like to talk about on this podcast, is like understanding human behavior, understanding biases, understanding your own weaknesses and outsmarting them. Investing is a real opportunity to turn that into money. So it's pretty exciting in that sense.
Yeah, that's amazing. So what I'm hearing you say, two parts to it. The first part that I'm hearing is emotion and intuition are probably not the frameworks that you want to utilize to make these decisions. And, opt for the logical framework of how your brain works. And the second thing I heard was the way you can use emotion is if you're feeling the sudden urge to, oh shit, I should buy right now. You're like, I should probably do the exact opposite. And why? Look for the reasons for why. And once you have those reasons, go for it.
Yeah. Okay. And one more thing I also want to mention about learning about this stuff is, and this has been an interesting shift for me, like in the last year or so, is also learn about fiat money. So fiat money is the term for what we usually just call money, right? It's like dollars and euros and so on. That's fiat money. And funnily enough, so the term fiat is Latin for let there be, as in let there be light or let there be money. So why is it called fiat money? Because the central bank can say, let there be money, and then there's more of it, right? And so that has been really interesting for me because obviously with the pandemic, a lot of governments have been printing a lot of money. And especially the US, the amount of money, and the US is important here because it's the world reserve currency. The US dollar is the world reserve currency. And an absolutely insane amount of US dollars have been printed in the last 12 months. And I think that the number has even gone up. Last time I checked, it was something like 20%. So $1 in $5 that exist in the world today were printed in the last 12 months. But I think that's actually gone up. So the money printing is off the rails. And of course, this is concerning because it could lead to inflation. Because right, you increase the supply of money, and in a supply-demand economy, that means that money is getting less valuable. And this is one of the big value propositions of Bitcoin. It's like there are going to be a total of 21 million Bitcoin and not a single one more ever. So it is a fixed supply. So which would suggest that it would probably be a deflationary currency. Again, this is complicated. Look into it. There's more to it than this. Same with the money printing.
This is where we're getting to the technical stuff.
Yeah. And it's the same with the money printing, by the way, right? It's the simple way to say it is governments are printing lots of money. It's much more complicated than that. And it's worth learning about it, right? But the reason I bring this up is it's fascinating to learn about blockchain technology and cryptocurrency. It's also fascinating to learn about the thing that we just unquestioningly accept as money. And the more I've learned about fiat money, the more I've been motivated to divest from fiat money. Because, for example, the US dollar was fully unpegged from gold. So at some point, it was backed by gold. And that was, the value of the paper dollar was basically like, well, this represents a certain amount of gold. The US dollar was fully unpegged from gold in 1971. And since then, it has lost about 90% of its value due to inflation. In other words, right, if you think about if you had $10,000 in a savings account in 1971, you could now buy about 10% of the things that would have afforded you in 1971. So fiat money is in most cases a rapidly, a crawlingly depreciating asset. You're constantly losing money while you're holding money, essentially, right? And that also helps you when you understand how shaky the history of fiat money has been. And then you look at how much money has been printed, and you look at the value that fiat money loses, you're probably going to be a lot less motivated to hold on to fiat money. And then all of a sudden, something like Bitcoin looks like an interesting, it's like, yes, I might lose money on Bitcoin, but I'm definitely losing money on money. So, and that's where, again, I think it's very worthwhile to dive into this, because all of this is I'm trying to give like previews and teasers of what I've discovered so far, because, each of these could be a whole podcast on its own. And there are other sources where people discuss this in great detail that I think, I don't want to be talking about this because, like I said, I'm not the expert on this. I basically want to motivate people. I want to nudge people in these directions, because I think that will give you the knowledge that gives you the power to use this to your advantage and to build wealth in the future, But yeah, that's also one of the things that I want to encourage people, like, take a look at the history of safe assets like money and real estate and stuff like that, and see what you learn and see how that changes your view about what you should do with your money,
So you just aside from, go deeper into it than the mainstream narrative, like, oh, real estate is safe, just buy a house whenever the fuck, because reasons. Okay. So, well, the thing that I know about money, or I heard, I could be wrong, is like the rate of inflation is like 2 to 3% a year,
Yeah.
right? So, in your example, if in 1971 you had $10,000,
Hmm.
and right now that same money equated or was literally $1,000 in your account, you'd be like, "What the fuck is this?"
Yeah.
But what happens is, what happens is that 10 grand in your account is actually 100 grand right now. So you're like, "Whoa, look at all the money I have."
Yeah.
So that's why your brain doesn't recognize that I've actually lost 90%,
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
or you know what I'm trying to
Yeah.
say,
Yeah.
right?
No, because you don't
Or sorry,
actually
the
lose the
equivalent would be
money. Yeah.
that.
You don't actually lose the money.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. Because if you actually keep your $10,000 in the savings account for 10 years, it's still $10,000. And so it seems like everything's fine. It's just that you can't buy as much anymore with those $10,000.
The purchasing power goes
Yeah.
down. That's what it is. Yeah. The numerical value stays the same. Purchasing power goes down.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So it
Wait,
creeps
I
up
had
on you.
something follow. Yeah, I had something to follow. Oh, right. The question that came to mind was, so the example you gave, in 50 years, the US dollar has lost 90% of its value. But has it, I'm showing my lack of knowledge here, but has there been a time where the US dollar just like skyrocketed and then fell down again?
No.
Because that's what's happening with Bitcoin,
Yeah.
right? So in either case, it's not safe.
Yeah.
Like the argument can be made for the US dollar that it's a little safer in this regard.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. That's absolutely true. So the value of the US dollar has been is the volatility of fiat currency is minuscule unless the volatility of until a war starts or something like that. So there are things that can happen that will send inflation through the roof and things like that, so that even fiat currency can become volatile. But for a long time, currencies like the euro and the and the Swiss franc and the US dollar and pound sterling and so on, these are assets with very low volatility, and that of course is a great benefit, because exactly with Bitcoin, with Bitcoin, the crazy thing is, since its inception, it has appreciated by an average of 200% per year. And that's also one of the reasons why some people are super bullish about Bitcoin, because it's like, if you just buy and hold Bitcoin, or at least in the last 10 years, if you just bought and hold Bitcoin at any time, it doesn't matter when, then you made so much profit. It's almost impossible to make more money by trading, It's like, which trader makes 200 a year, right? 200% a year. That's unheard of. How are you going to out-trade the performance of Bitcoin in the last 10 years? There's basically no chance. And so that's why a lot of people are just like, look, just buy it anytime, doesn't matter what the price is, just hold on to it for your dear life. But of course, when you like zoom in, it has collapsed by 90% more than once, and and it has collapsed by more than 50% many times. So at any given moment, you might be losing an absolutely hair-raising amount of money from one day to the next, right? And that's the matter of volatility. And of course, also when I say it appreciates by 200% a year, look, I hope it's going to keep doing that. As someone who has some Bitcoin, I hope it's going to keep doing that. It would be great. But it's probably not, right? Because again,
this is where... Sorry, I was just going to add, this is where we identify Shane's incentives on why he's talking.
Well, it's not like I can move the price of Bitcoin by telling people to buy some more, Yeah. But yeah, no, obviously it would be great if it kept doing that, but it's probably not going to keep doing that. But I'm just saying that it is extremely high return with extremely high volatilities. I don't think there's ever been something like that before, actually. And we'll see how it turns out. But yes, and this is another thing I think it's very interesting to learn about. Okay, so volatility is a factor that matters. Liquidity is a factor that matters. One thing about Bitcoin and cash are that both of them are very liquid. So, if I need to buy something now, I can do it using cash, and I can do it maybe like half an hour from now using Bitcoin. It's like, it's not quite the same amount of liquidity, but I'm not stuck in, like, if I need that money I'm not stuck. I can get that money pretty quickly. Whereas something like real estate has really poor liquidity. So if I suddenly need the cash, I can't just sell my house now and then spend the cash, right? And these are all factors that also, well, when you start thinking about where do I want to put my money, these are all factors to take into account. So, and for example, this is, I also think that there's a lot of promise there, because crypto is something that a lot of young people are interested, like essentially tech natives, right? People who grew up with tech are more likely to be in favor of and less spooked by something like Bitcoin and crypto in general. And I think that's a great thing, because if you're young, that is exactly the right moment in time to be putting money into potentially high yield but very volatile and risky investments. Well, that's great. If it doesn't work out, it's fine. You have your whole life ahead of you. If it works out, great, you can retire early, So, but these are all things, again, that's all part of the stuff. Like the more about this you learn, the more power you have. The whole reason I wanted to make this episode is like, I think that from what I've seen, and I've also, just as a bit of context, I'm not like wildly wealthy, but I have built up my wealth basically starting from scratch, right? So I didn't have any big inheritance or anything like that. I don't have rich parents. So I've basically gone from just like doing work as an entrepreneur, like selling things that I made with my own hands, literally. That's how I started. And I've turned that into, I've done wealth building on that, right? I've turned that into a reasonable amount of wealth, And what I've seen is that the path to this leads really away from like mainstream advice. So my concern is that if you kind of just tune into mainstream, and I don't even mean that in the sense of like mainstream media, I also mean it just in the sense of like the general conversation, the conversation that happens in media, the conversation that happens among your friends, like the average conversation. If you kind of tune into that and you play it safe, you play it safe and you do everything that's like the most commonly accepted normal thing to do, and you stay uninformed while doing it, that is a recipe for staying poor or even becoming poor. Because in the mainstream, you have all this. So for example, like how accepted is it? Like the thing with real estate, it is so acceptable to just go into insane debt to buy a house. And it's like, how many uninformed real estate buyers are there where they're basically buying a house and they're making this deal with a bank to take out this loan for a house based on very, very little information. They're not actually making a sound investment. They know very little about actually investing. They know very little about really what do the conditions of this loan actually mean for my financial future. It's just that everyone says, yes, that's the thing to do, right? You should buy a house and you use a bank loan to do it. That's normal. And it's socially acceptable. Nobody pushes back against that, basically. Whereas if you go, you know what, I'm going to rent and buy Bitcoin, everyone's like, oh, you're crazy. That sounds crazy. That's not the normal thing to do, But I'm really concerned that if you follow the norm is going to be lagging so far behind what's most effective that it's a recipe for staying poor. And this is really why I'm essentially pushing people to deepen their knowledge. It really is a game where knowledge is power.
Yeah, and first of all, the amount of respect I have for you for putting out this kind of information and coming from that place is just unparalleled. Because what you're sharing is, in the way I perceive it, is like step one to winning is to make sure you can't lose. And now let's focus on the winning condition, right? So that was the premise of our podcast conversation. So number one, how to not lose everything you have just because you're excited right now, right? And so a few things that we covered was, don't invest more than you can you're willing to part ways with. Like once you invest, consider it gone. Like don't think that you didn't actually lose it, but it would be, if it makes zero emotional difference to you that you've lost whatever, 1,000, 2,000, that means you invested the right amount, right? The second thing that you mentioned was vet the information by the argumentation that the experts are using, not just what they're saying, plus their incentives. So draw your own conclusions from there. So these are two of the pillars of how to not lose everything you own in the Bitcoin market or the NFT market or whatever the fuck market, right?
Yeah.
So the third step I would ask you for now is, well, the interesting part. How do you actually make a shit ton of money on this, assuming that the first two are handled?
Well, like the only true answer to this, the only true answer I can give that's not based on a flawed prediction is that you keep leveling up your power in this game, right? So you keep learning more, you keep kind of finding and gathering more and higher quality sources of information, and you basically keep feeding your brain in such a way that over time you can make better and better investment decisions. Because the truth is, of course, I can tell you what I think right now, and like I said, I think that Bitcoin is a good long-term play, at least for a 5 to 10 year horizon. I don't see any problem there. And I'm also very bullish about like Ethereum. I think Ethereum, especially with the changes that are coming up in like the following 1 or 2 years, I think is a great technology, is super promising technology. I'm very bullish about it. And I think you can make a lot of money on these things. But the key to what I'm saying is not the statements I make right now about what I believe is true, because I'm just some dude. And first of all, I can be wrong. But secondly, I'm going to continually make informed decisions based on what I see, right? It's like, the thing is, if Ethereum, so as an example, again, I'm not going to go into technical details, but in Ethereum, right now, as we're recording this, there's kind of a bit of a scuffle between Ethereum miners and the development team. And I don't think anything will come from this, but it will be possible that like Ethereum forks, so then we have two versions of Ethereum, and the version that I think is the wrong version wins. If that happens, that changes my position on Ethereum, right? But the point is that I can see that happening and I can understand what it means. I can understand what it means when it says the the Ethereum miners are saying this, the developers are saying this. I can make sense of that. And I can make an informed decision to either get in or get out before the price moves, right? So that's the real secret sauce. So that's how you basically make money. If you allocate, and that would also be the next step after you build a bit of a savings cushion like we talked about. After that, one of the best things you can do, and especially if you're young, one of the best things you can do is do what you can to make more money and don't spend it. Don't spend money on things like cars and rent and going out and stuff like that. And you don't have to live like you don't have to live like a cave dweller or something. Obviously you can have nice things, but I think it's a big mistake to just spend all of your money on shit you don't need, right? I think spend some of your money on shit you don't need because that's enjoyable. But there's huge power in making more money and not spending it, which also, by the way, in my own journey of wealth building, that's the biggest play I made, is my income kept going up and my expenses stayed the same. I was living like a broke person for years while my income was going up. So I think that's one of the most powerful things you can do. And you start allocating, month by month, you just put a chunk of your money into investments and you learn about investing. And look, investing can be in stocks, it can be in real estate, it can be in crypto. Investing can be in your own business. Initially, I invested almost all of my money into my own business. And that was a good call. Made a high return on that. But in every case, it's if you have the habit of making money that you don't spend and instead have that for investments, and you're making intelligent, informed investing decisions, you understand what's going on, and you can make a call like, is it a better idea to put this into stocks or into crypto? Is it a better idea to invest in my own business or in someone else's business? If the more you increase that power, the more you're doing like wealth building activity, So yeah, that's how you make money from it. It's like, I know that's not as exciting as listening to some pundit saying, okay, buy this and buy that and buy the other and then you'll be rich. But that's not how it works. Like nobody gets rich by just listening to some weirdo on a podcast saying, hey, buy these two things and then that's it,
Yeah, so true. One thing I'd like to add to that the way I perceive it, and please correct me if I'm wrong. One of the most beneficial ways that I learned to interact with, for example, my salary, was to not look at it in terms of the numerical amount, but to look at it in terms of percentages.
Yeah.
Okay, so 10%, no matter what, is going to savings.
Yeah.
The ideal case is if you start at 10% being $100, like, 6 months from now, your 10% is now 1,000.
Yeah.
But in your mind, you're like, oh, okay, so I live off 60%, whatever. I'm just throwing numbers out there. I live off 60% of my salary. And eventually you come to a place where like, oh, okay, the 60% is way too much. I don't need to spend it all, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, that's super powerful. Yeah, that's super powerful, and I think that's really important, and especially the rebalancing, right? Because if you start out on a low salary, you can maybe put aside 10%, but as your salary goes up or as your income goes up, you do get to that point where it's like, hey, I can easily live on 50% of this, and the more you get in, when you get to the point where you're like living on 30% of your income, and the rest is money that you can basically invest into your future. That's such a powerful position to be in.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I would like to plug something.
Yeah.
There is this game by Robert Kiyosaki called Cash Flow, and like that game completely changed my financial literacy. I didn't understand that money actually meant something. For example, the main thing I learned from that game was when you borrow from the bank, there is a certain amount the bank takes from you every month.
Yeah.
But then you see all these, like, for example, you see your house, you see your car, you see your credit card. Even though your credit card, you took 1,000 from your credit card, 1,000 from the bank is charging you more to use that $1,000 than the credit card is.
Right.
So the numerical value being the same is not the same as an expense. So you start seeing money you have as an expense itself. It's mind-blowing. Like, I love this game. It changed my fucking life. I'm not even kidding.
That's cool. Yeah.
So I'll definitely link that.
Yeah, that's cool. I had no idea about this, but yeah, we'll also put a link to that in the show notes. That sounds cool. Yeah, like, it makes sense. Yeah, like financial literacy through games sounds like a good idea, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, because then you start playing to get out the quote unquote rat race. And once you're out, you're like, wow, life is so easy when I'm out, like in the board game, right?
Yeah.
So you start feeling the incentive to do that in real life.
That's
and
cool.
there's one of my friends, like, he's huge into Bitcoin and stuff, and he actually modeled his life around that game. And anyways, it doesn't matter. Yeah, it's amazing what people have been able to accomplish. So, okay, to wrap up, or not wrap up, but to summarize the point you were making. And I love it when you explain these things, because I know them as like the one-liners I've heard, right? So, for example, the one-liner I heard was, the longest path to success is always a shortcut. So right now, how you just described, like the quickest way to get rich is to continually level yourself up. So your understanding goes deeper. And by the time you're making decisions, every decision you make is improving.
Yeah.
Right? That is your get rich quick advice right there.
It is. Yeah, it is.
Okay. The other thing I want to touch on, something a bit different, and I don't truly understand this, but I saw that there are some form of environmental factors, or like people are claiming this is bad for the environment. Like, what is that all about? I have zero clue.
Right.
I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
So the Bitcoin network, as well as other blockchain networks, are secured by something that's called proof of work. And essentially this is like, I'm not sure how to non-technically explain this, but you can imagine that like all the transactions in the Bitcoin network, like, how do you make sure that no one can come in and like just fake that, right? Because, hey, why can't I just go in, make a Bitcoin note or something, and I'll just write down Shane has 1,000 Bitcoin. That would be pretty good for me, right? So how do I avoid that from happening? Well, there's this proof of work, which is essentially a network of what are called miners that are running computers and solving cryptographic puzzles. And the new transactions can only be secured or placed in the network when all this work is being done, okay? So, and essentially the reason this happens is that if I wanted to spoof the spoof the record. So if I wanted to just give myself 1,000 free Bitcoin, I would have to provide at least 51% of the total computing power in the network, which is basically impossible because it's been done by millions upon millions of computers all around the world. So it is this work, it's this cryptographic work that is distributed in the network that essentially guarantees that no single actor can hack the network or can do anything like that. Now, the downside of this is that it takes a lot of energy. And I think it's true that this is a weakness in Bitcoin. In terms of like the environmental impact, it seems it would be better if that weren't the case. But this is one of those things. When you see a headline of someone going, oh my God, crypto is all this, the environmental impact, it's a disaster, and that's why you shouldn't be in crypto. It's like, okay, try to find an argument in one of those articles. Like, try to find an argument that indicates that the person who wrote it actually knows what the fuck is going on. Because in most cases, because the first question is, it has a large environmental impact compared to what? It's like, yes, of course, yes, it has an environmental impact, and it would be nice if it didn't. But compared to what is this a disaster? Is it a disaster compared to the environmental impact of fiat money, of the traditional banking system? How does it compare to gold mining? Because we still use gold, right? Gold is still a store of value. How does it compare to the environmental impact of digging gold out from under mountains to fucking put them in a safe somewhere under a different mountain? And if you look at the relative environmental impact of this stuff, you'll be a lot less worried about it. But also, if someone goes, oh my God, the reason Bitcoin is bad is the environmental impact. Well, are you excited about proof of stake, which is a different way to secure a network that has basically no environmental impact to speak of? I bet that most of the authors writing this stuff have no idea what proof of stake is. They don't understand probably proof of work to begin with. They don't understand why this is happening to begin with. They don't know that there are alternatives. Because really, if anything, if you truly understand what's going on, then yes, you might write an article that says, Bitcoin is maybe bad because it's doing this to the environment, but you'd probably be bullish about something else that uses proof of stake, right? And so when I see, and this is the thing that I think is it just seems to be propaganda or misinformation, right? Because if someone is basically writing an article just to get people who are uninformed, to get them all riled up about this without actually providing information. And it's like, it seems to be disingenuous to me. Because if your goal was to inform people, then surely you would mention the relative impacts, and surely you would mention proof of work versus proof of stake. If you wanted to inform people, surely you would mention those things, right? And if you don't know about those things, then you have no place to write this article. And that's also one of the things with NFTs, right? There's been a lot of fuss about, oh my God, this NFT that sold for $70 million or whatever. Look, this is how much energy it's used up. Well, look into that. What does it mean that this NFT used this much energy? Because of course it's more complicated than that. And also, if this NFT is on the Ethereum network, wouldn't that make you really excited about Ethereum 2.0, which is proof of stake, right? So if you're just shouting about, oh, look at this disaster, like without mentioning that we might be within a year of this entire disaster ending on the Ethereum network, and it's like, what are you doing? So it just seems, most of this stuff that I see just seems totally disingenuous. And it seems like the kind of thing where you rely on uninformed people only reading the headline, right? So if uninformed people are like scrolling through Facebook and whatnot, and they just see a bunch of headlines, oh, Bitcoin is bad for the environment, Bitcoin this, Bitcoin that, that becomes their opinion. But they have learned nothing about Bitcoin. They don't actually know what's going on, right? When someone tells you, oh, Bitcoin is bad because it's bad for the environment, that's usually the extent of their knowledge. They can't explain to you why it's bad for the environment. They can't explain to you what the environmental impact is. They can't explain to you what, they don't know anything. They can't answer a single question about this thing. And it's like, that's not a good reason to not be invested in Bitcoin.
Yeah, excellent answer. And, as you were talking about that, that's what came to mind. I'm like, okay, it's almost like what you would tell to someone who reads headlines, forms an opinion, and tweets.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
That's like the base level knowledge that they operate at.
Yeah. And another thing actually on this note, if you look at something like NFTs that are, yes, there's energy consumption involved with that, but also like artists are getting paid for stuff. This is potentially creating jobs. This is potentially putting money into the economy and so on, right? That there's actual value being created. And it's, so it's like, and the cost, there's some energy cost to this value creation on the internet. Well, you know what else uses up a ton of energy? It's like all of the data harvesting and data processing that's happening as you're browsing the internet, where the huge companies like Facebook and Google and so on it takes a lot of data it takes a lot of energy rather to capture all this data, to capture all the data of every move that you make, on one of these platforms. And that takes a lot of energy. And also the processing, all this huge amounts of data are being processed in gigantic machine learning, basically gigantic warehouses full of computing power, doing the machine learning, servers storing all this information and so on. All of that uses an enormous amount of energy. And what value does it create? It invades people's privacy, usually against their will. I mean, yes, obviously we all check the I've read and agreed thing, but we don't actually fucking agree if we actually understood what this thing says, right? So it invades people's privacy and it enriches 5 companies in the world? And somehow that's okay, that's another form of energy consumption through internet use, essentially. But yeah, the difference is it basically creates no value. But somehow the same people don't seem to be worried about that,
It's because ignorance is bliss, right?
Yeah. Anyway, so I guess what you could say is if someone does the headline, if someone's argument is the headline, Bitcoin bad because environment, then I'm going to counter with the headline, well, yeah, attention economy bad because everything. So, if you can make your point about how cryptocurrency is bad, then I can shoehorn in my point about how the attention economy is bad. That's my thing.
Yeah, completely agree. At some point, I want to talk to you about the attention economy as well, because I think it's much older than what we believe now. Just because after you know this about me, I'm a huge advertising nerd, and I've read books 100 years old, and people were talking about this in late 1890s, Claude Hopkins, whenever he wrote his book, he's talking about this is the science. Here's how you track everything.
Yeah.
This is what you do. No penny ever goes miscalculated, right? So it's a lot older than we think it is.
Yeah, that's actually. So, that should be our next episode. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, I wanted to just ask you. We've been going on for quite a while, and I absolutely love talking to you. But is there anything else that you would have liked to bring up in the conversation that has not been said yet?
Yeah, no, I think this is, obviously I could talk about this for a very long time, but I think we've done a decent job of covering what I think, I feel like the value that I can bring to this, I think we've probably reached about the limit of that, So I think that the most useful thing we can do now is just link people to some other resources, right? And like I said, in the show notes, we'll have some of that. And let me just right away, for people just listening this as a podcast, right away, what you can do in your podcast app is you can look for the Bankless podcast and you can look for the Unchained podcast. Those are 2 pretty good sources of, so Bankless is really nerdy. If you just listen to a random episode, you might not understand most of the stuff they're talking about, right? Because they're really talking to insiders. But I think that can be good to stretch your brain to get to the point where you actually know what they mean with most of these things they're talking about. And then Unchained is a bit more beginner friendly, I think. But those are 2 sources where I think you can get some really solid information about what's going on. And we'll have some more in the show notes as well.
Okay, perfect. So hopefully we have provided enough information for someone to not lose everything they own.
That would be good.
In any of these hypes.
That would be a good start, yes.
Amazing. Well, Shane, thank you so much for your time.
All right, thank you, man. And here's just another quick post-podcast disclaimer. I am not a financial advisor. None of this should be construed as financial advice. So if you think I told you to take a bunch of money and throw it at something in the hopes of quick riches, then I'm not sure what podcast you listen to, but maybe listen to it again before you do that. Also, for anyone who's listening, who's well into this crypto stuff and also into, personal finance and so on, I tried to simplify my explanations without oversimplifying them. But if you think that some of the things I mentioned or explained were somehow oversimplified, or I missed an important point, or it was, misleading or wrong in any way, then I would love to have a discussion about that. So you can leave a comment. You can go to the show notes at ikario.com/024, or leave a comment on YouTube or wherever. And basically, I would love to hear your take, and I would love to learn from you because, well, like I said during the whole episode, that's basically the whole point. I want to be improving my knowledge. So if you heard a knowledge gap in what I was talking about, let me know about it and let's talk about it.